Hello, everyone in internet world. I hope everyone is doing fine in today's climate. Things seem pretty uncertain and very nerve-wracking. So, all the best wishes to everyone out there. So, I wanted to come on and spread some joy, just have some kind of fun. And I've been away for a while because life happens when you're making other plans. And I wanted to share one of my passions, and that happens to be music, but not just any kind of music. Recently, I got my hands on a collection, a CD collection of a band I was not familiar with, but I have grown to love, appreciate, and I found myself to become a fan. And I've also had a pretty amazing experience experiencing these albums, which I've never heard before from this particular band. And you probably already know by the title of the video who I'm talking about, but let me go ahead and try to be surprising anyway. The band I am talking about is The Smits. Now, for those who already know, I don't have to explain this. But for those who don't know, you might be asking, who are the Smits? The Smits are comprised of four individuals, and that is Morrissey, the vocalist, Johnny Marr, the amazing guitarist of the group, and then there is the bassist, who is Andy Work, and then the drummer, Mike Joyce. Now, you'll hear a lot about the contributions and the talents of Morrissey and Johnny Marr. They've always gotten more of the spotlight when people talk about the legacy and the history of the Smiths. And by the way, I'm not going to go into backstage drama, politics, anything like that. I'm just strictly talking about the work and the music. And then the rhythm section, and so I have to keep looking at the names. I don't know them off the top of my head. Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce don't get as much credit as Morrissey and Johnny Marr do, but their talent should not be overseen. If there are some things to actually talk about when it comes to their contributions to the band as well. So let's dive into the history of the Smiths for a little bit and talk about what made them so unique and different at the time they came out. Now, they came out during the 80s, 1980s. And when people think of the 1980s when it comes to pop music or music in general at the time, people will talk about people like Michael Jackson, Madonna, Duran Duran, Wham, pick an 80s band that are synonymous with the 80s, and people will talk about them for days and days on end. The Smiths, when they came out, at the time they did, they were very radically different from any other popular band at the time. What made them so different was, for one thing, their singer, Morrissey, who didn't sing in a rough, intense, aggressive style that a lot of rock pop vocalists tend to do. That was a cliche. He didn't follow that. He actually had a much more of a crooner type of style, and it was a much more, I wouldn't say fey, but it was a much more off the wall, much more softer attitude, and a much more fragile, vulnerable type of feel to the way he sounded. And some people might say like, I can't really take it serious the way he sings, but it was a completely different style, and looking back, it's something that has definitely worked and has been an influence. And if you look at also the material that the band did, and mostly Morrissey and his writing and what he wrote for the band, when they did their songwriting, their material, it didn't, again, it straight away from cliche. It wasn't about looking at the world through the eyes of a rock star and all of the excitement and grandioso that kind of moments that comes along with that lifestyle. Morrissey was coming from a very poetic type of point of view, and instead of romanticizing the kind of excess and excitements that a rock star would experience when they became a rock star, he was looking at the world for what it was, and making it a very kind of exploring the gray areas, not the black and white parts of the world, but the gray areas of modern day life, and just the simple, very mundane aspects of that, and trying to find romanticism in it, or trying to just explore how dreary it was, and just basically talking about the experiences that everyone experiences when it comes to everyday life. And they really touched a nerve, the Smiths, when it came to that kind of material. And also the sound of the Smiths was a different kind of rock sound. It wasn't hard, it wasn't brash, it wasn't in your face. It was much more of a softer, much more introspective and light type of attitude and sound when it came to the overall sound of the band. And you can actually see the influence of the Smiths and other bands like REM. That's a band that automatically comes off the top of my head, who kind of got the same kind of style, and really they have their own sound, their own style, their own image. And also a band like Radiohead, which, I mean, they definitely they have their hard and harsh, intense rock moments, but there was also a much more gentle, softer, weary kind of side to Radiohead. And I also think in Radiohead and REM, both vocalists of both bands, you can definitely tell that they took an influence when it came to singing a little bit from Morrissey, in terms of Morrissey singing, in that fragile, softer type of way of singing. So their influence has definitely been amazing, and it goes beyond just Radiohead and REM, but anyone who basically wants to be a rock band or wants to pick up a guitar after the 1980s or during the 80s, especially anyone who wanted to form a band in Britain, because the Smiths were really big and really successful in their native land. So that's a little bit of the history of the Smiths. So let me go ahead and talk about, let's just dive in and talk about the actual work. And let me go ahead and start off with their first album, which is Just the Smiths. Now, I'm not saying it's just the Smiths. That's just my way of saying it, but it's actually the Smiths. But I'm saying just the title is Just the Smiths. Okay, you get it. So, as a debut album, how does the Smiths hold up? Is it great? Is it good? Is it somewhere in between? For a first debut, it's pretty good. If you want to start somewhere and you've never heard of the Smiths, this is the place to start. Hopefully you can see this. This is good, right? Okay. With songs like Ring Around the Fountain, Miserable Lie. Oh, here's an interesting one. Pretty Girls Make Graves. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. This Charming Man. You probably heard of that one. Hand in Glove. I Don't Owe You Anything. Suffer Little Children. What is that all about? What kind of title is that? Well, let's go ahead and dive into this. Let's talk about Ring Around the Fountain. And that's the first song you hear off of the album. And this song gives you a pretty clear indication of what the Smiths are all about in terms of their sound, their attitude, and the mood that they project. And it's a very it's a soft sounding type of sound, and it's not harsh. And I think the soft mood with the subject matter, it's definitely a subject matter that you wouldn't expect from a rock band. I mean, a title like "Ring Around the Fountain," what's that all about? Does it have to do with child games or something like that? But it's easier if you listen to it. It's hard to explain, but one thing I like about the Smiths is that after listening to this album and then other albums that precede this or follow this, I should say, correction there on my part. I like it when the Smiths they when they display uh, a minor song, they try to get all the darkness and the dreadfulness of that type of sounding song. They try to really bring out the I wouldn't say negative, but the very the kind of heartache moments, the heartache of what comes out of a minor key song. And I like it when they go into that kind of in songs like Hand in Glove or Suffer Little Children, which is actually based on a case that happened in England. I think, if I remember right, it's a older couple who actually committed the ghastly murder of a couple of kids, and it's a very, I wouldn't say that it's a type of song that actually makes you scared. The Smiths are not trying to be scared, but there's a very melancholy. I forgot to mention too, the Smiths love to be melancholy whenever they can, especially Morrissey whenever he can. He tries to be melancholy all the time. And so there's much more of a sorrow kind of melancholy sound and flavor to that. And there's nothing macabre about Suffer Little Children based on that kind of title. And then there's a song like This Charming Man, which is their first, I think a lot of people would say their first masterpiece, especially as a single. And it's a very, very upbeat, I don't know if you would say dancey, but lots of people like to talk about what's the interpretation of that song and what's it all about. Uh, Whatever you want, whatever you think it is, you go ahead, you accept that, and you own it. For me, it's just it's a very happy song. I think that's the best way to describe This Charming Man. And the one thing about This Charming Man, the kind of the one element that people and I've seen other people talk about this, the bass line by Andy Rourke is actually the driving force behind that kind of song. And without it, the song would be completely different. Also, I forgot to mention too this is not just in This Charming Man, but the guitar work from Johnny Marr. I mean, when people talk about guitar heroes, this guy is up there. And the other thing too is that Johnny Marr composes, if not all the music, then like 99% of the music of the Smiths. And so this guy is just working his tail off trying to compose these songs, and then he's making he's playing all the guitar parts, and then he overdubs on guitars. He adds layers after layers of guitars, and just this complex construction of guitar work, and it's all over the place on not just this album, but also the Smiths' other work. And it's Johnny Marr's guitar, whenever it can, it tries to make its presence known. And it's just when you listen to just how the guitar works and what it does for the song, you just can't help but just go, wow, I can't believe, like, who's playing that? That's unbelievable. So, as a debut album, the Smiths do not disappoint. If I had to give it a rating, I would definitely give it I don't know if I would give it a 5. I'd probably get a 4.5 out of 5. But anyway, I don't know why am I even talking about. Just if you haven't listened to the Smiths yet, this is a great place to start. And really, it's an alternative type of band making alternative music with guitar rock sounds, and what you get from it is a rock band like no other, especially at the time when they came out. And it's an album and a collection of songs that's very introspective, very melancholy, and very mundane. So that will be it for now. Thanks for watching, and we will definitely continue on and talk about the rest of the Smiths albums with the continuation of Meat is Murder.